Societies and economy. Objectives. In this unit, you will get to know in general about the main socio-economic changes which crystallized by the period of second urbanization, and especially about the main segments of the society, social order, and the disabilities imposed on the Sudras. Evidences and the causative factors for the growth of food producing economy. Main features of rural and urban economy, and main crafts and occupations, along with the nature of trade and trade routes during the period. Introduction. Before we discuss in any details the major aspects of society and economy in the period between 6th century BC and 4th century BC, it is necessary as an introduction to recapitulate some of the points already discussed. First, the later Vedic society seems to reflect a shift to a new geographical region, that is the upper and middle Ganga Valley, as well as consolidation of agrarian economy. Second, the appearance of rulers and others who enjoyed shares of wealth produced by society without producing any wealth themselves, and institutionalized inequality in society. This institutionalization of inequality meant the emergence of state and the state apparatus. It also meant further consolidation of the theory of the division of society into four varnas, because the Varna theory elaborated the ways in which different sections of society should perform their duties. Other sources of information. We have a variety of texts which provide us with information about the society and economy of the 6th to the 4th century BC period. There are many Brahmanical texts meant to instruct people in the performance of day-to-day rites and rituals. They are called Griha Sutras, Sruta Sutras, Srauta Sutras, and Dharma Sutras. Among these manuals, some texts like those of Upstambh belong to this period. The grammar of Panini provides brief references to many communities in those times. However, our primary source of information about this period are the various Buddhist texts written in the Pali language. The early Buddhist canons date back to the period between the 6th to the 4th century BC. Our information about the contemporary society is also enriched by the study of archaeological sites related to the northern black polished ware. The society of the 6th to the 4th century BC is a society undergoing a tremendous change. Preachers, princes, and merchants vie for our attention. This was the time when cities came into existence for the first time in historical India. This was also the time when literate tradition began. Towards the end of this period, the society has acquired the knowledge of writing, and the earliest script of ancient India is called the Brahmi script. The invention of writing expanded the horizon of knowledge. Socially acquired knowledge had been transmitted through memorization from one generation to another. There was a possibility of lots of things being forgotten or changed over a period of time. The invention of writing meant the knowledge could be stored without tampering with it. This fact heightened the consciousness of change. This was because social structure and beliefs kept changing in time. Once things were written down, those changes became observable to the people of the subsequent period when ideas and beliefs had changed. Let us discuss about the various sections of society who are caught in the flux of change. Kshatriyas. The Kshatriyas appear to be the most visible and powerful section of society in the contemporary literature. Buddha and Mahavira belong to this group. In the Brahmanical texts, the Kshatriyas have been equated with the warrior caste. This is the second highest caste in the Varna order. They were supposed to be the rulers of the society. However, the Buddhist literature gives a different picture of the Kshatriyas. They did not have the compactness and strict rules of marriage and characterize a caste. They are mentioned as the ruling lineages of the Ganasanghas, like those of Vaishali and Kapilvastu, referred to as the Shakyas, Lichavis, Mallas, etc. They were groups who owned land collectively. Their land was cultivated by slaves and laborers called the Das Karmakaras. They do not seem to have performed the Brahminical rituals. As such, we find the Buddhist literature generally talks of only two groups in the Ganasanghas. They are the high caste and the low caste. In these areas, instead of the fourfold Brahminical caste structure, there is a twofold division. The Brahmins and the Sudras are missing. These Kshatriya clans practiced various kinds of marriages customs, which included the cross-cousin marriage. In fact, they were so particular about whom to marry and not to marry that the Sakyas are supposed to have been destroyed because of this. According to a story, their overlord, the king of Kosala called Prasenjit, wanted to marry a Sakya girl. The Sakyas could not refuse the offer, so they sent a Sakya slave girl who was married to the king. The progeny of this marriage succeeded to the throne. Upon discovering this ruse played by the Sakyas, he destroyed them in anger. Although both the Koslan monarch and the Sakyas were Kshatriyas, they did not intermarry. This indicates that the Kshatriyas were not a caste in the sense we understand it. The Kshatriyas were very proud of their lineage and status. The Shakyas, Lichavis, Mallas, and other such clans jealously guarded their rights of entry in their assemblies, and other people were not allowed into these places. These assemblies decided most of the socio-political issues of the society. They did not pay land taxes, and they did not have a standing army. In times of war, the entire lineage would take to arms. In the kingdoms of Kosal, Kasi, etc., the rulers are referred to as Kshatriyas. However, unlike the Brahminical sources, the Buddhist sources place them at the top of the four caste structure. In one of the discourses, Buddha says, even when a Kshatriya has fallen into the lowest depths, he is still the best, and the Brahmins are low in comparison to him. Some of the Kshatriyas are shown as learned teachers and thinkers. Some others are described as taking to trade. As such, one can say that Brahminical notion of Kshatriya as the warrior caste was applicable to only some princely families in the upper and the middle Gangetic plains. They performed a variety of activities like preaching, trading, and supervising agriculture. Especially in eastern India, Kshatriyas did not exist as a caste. Rather, there were many separate groups who called themselves Kshatriyas. Brahmins. The Brahmins mentioned in the contemporary texts seem more like a caste group. Brahman is one who is born a Brahman. He may change his profession, still he remains a Brahman. The Brahminical texts give them the privilege of meditation, give them a privilege of mediation between man and God. They had the exclusive rights of performing sacrifices. This group was imbued with the consciousness of being the highest caste. They also seem to have followed certain rules of avoiding impure food and habitations. The Shatpat Brahman, a contemporary Brahminical text, mentions four important marks of a Brahman. They are Brahminical parentage, suitable behavior, attainment of fame, and teaching of men. For doing this, they were supposed to enjoy certain privileges. They were to be respected, given presents, and were given immunity from death sentence. Many Brahmins did not follow the life of renouncement and teaching. The Buddhist literature is generally critical of the Brahmins. However, it is critical of the Brahmins who had deviated from the pious ethical life. They criticized the excessive ritualism and greediness of the Brahmins. Many Brahmins embraced Buddhism. It has been found that among the early followers of Buddha, Brahmins were present in largest numbers. However, the Pali literature also indicates that the Brahmins had taken to various kinds of professions. In the Dash Brahman Jataka, we are told a story which will give us an idea of the Buddhist attitude toward the Brahmins. In ancient times, there reigned in the city of Indrapat, in the kingdom of Kuru, King Kauravya, of the family of Yudhishthira. He was advised by his minister Vidura in worldly and spiritual things. He, that is the king, gave him a seat and asked his advice. Seek Brahmans Vidura, that are virtuous and learned, who eschewing sensual pleasures would enjoy my gifts. O friend, we will make where what is given will bear rich fruit. Very difficult to find are Brahman, O king, that are virtuous and learned. ठीक है, इसी हिसाब से लिखा हुआ सारा जो है. This story gives an idea of the variety of activities performed by the Brahmins. It also gives us a glimpse of the range of professions present in the contemporary society. Even with the changes in the profession, they are considered unworthy Brahmins. They do not lose their caste. References to learned Brahmins are also legion. So are the references to Brahman agriculturists who cultivated their own land or got their land cultivated by slaves and servants. However, their primary identity as a caste concerned with the divine had already been formed. Vaishyas and Gahapati. In the Brahminical Varna system, Vaishya was the third caste in the ritual order. They were entrusted with cattle herding, agriculture and trade. The Buddhist literature, on the other hand, uses the term Gahapati more frequently. Gahapati literally means the master of the household. This community of landholders cultivated its land with the family labor or the labor of slaves and servants. They seem to have emerged out of the Rajanya and groups mentioned in the Vedic literature. Their emergence represents the emergence of family and individual ownership of wealth. Earlier wealth was collectively owned by the entire lineage. Apart from the Gahapatis, the Buddhist literature mentions a whole range of professionals and merchants who would fall under the category of the Vaishyas of the Brahminical texts. Each of them were close kinship groups who would not intermarry. Their identity was defined by the kind of professions they followed and by their geographical location. As such, there never was a Vaishya caste in the Brahminical sense of the term. Rather, there were many groups having caste-like formations. Let us look at some of these groups. As already mentioned, the Gahapatis form a prominent category of landowners. Interestingly enough, they are rarely found in the Ganasanghas where land was owned by a Kshatriya lineage. They are frequently mentioned in the monarchies of the Middle Gangetic Valley. They were the primary exploiters of agriculture and the source of revenue for the kings. Gahapatis included men of wealth who were also assured with carpentry, medicine, etc. The Pali texts use another term, Kutumbika, in a synonymous sense, which would mean the head of the household, that is Kutumba. They are shown as rich landowners dealing in corn or money transactions. It was from the class of rich landowners that a section of rich traders evolved. The Gahapatis are mentioned in trading towns too. Individual ownership of wealth and weak Brahminical influence helped the Gahapatis use their wealth for trade. In the western Gangetic Valley, this wealth would have been used for sacrifices. Thus, out of this emerges the class of Sethi. The word Sethi literally means a person having the best. The Sethi Gahapati refers to a very rich merchant and bankers having close contact with the king. Anthapindika, who donated the Jetavana in Saravasti to Buddha, was one such rich Sethi. A Sethi in Banaras engages in trade and drives a caravan of 500 wagons. Their profession as bankers flourished with the invention of coined money. Coins called Shatman, Karshapan, etc. are mentioned in the contemporary literature. Excavations have also shown that coins had come in use by this period. Long distance trade is frequently mentioned. Apart from the big merchants and landlords, many small scale traders are also mentioned. Among them, shopkeeper, retailer, trader, peddlers, selling pots and pans, carpenters, ivory carvers, garland makers, and smiths can be mentioned. These groups formed professional unions. No one else but a family member could take up that profession. This local division of different kinds of works and the hereditary character of various professions gave them the character of guilds. They used to have a head who would look after their interests. The king was supposed to respect the internal rules of the guild and protect it. The presence of the guild indicates increased trading and manufacturing activity. It meant that groups identified significantly on the basis of their economic activity came into existence. These groups did have the character of caste. Each of these groups would marry inside the group only and their rules were considered inviolable. Shudras. The Shudras were the lowest caste in the Brahminical order. Their only duty was service to the other three castes. The non-Brahminical texts give us a picture of many oppressed and poor people who are bracketed as Shudras. The Pali literature frequently mentions dasas, that is slaves, and karmakaras, that is wage laborers. The term Dalida is used for denoting extremely poor people who did not have anything to eat and no covering for their back. So, for the first time, we have references to the rich living in luxury and the poor destitute. The process of such impoverishment and the formation of Shudra caste may be attributed to the appropriation of land and other resources by the powerful groups. The Shudras without any resources were reduced to servility and forced to work on the land of the rich. The more general reference to the Shudras include artisans and craftsmen also. The Dharma Sutras ascribe the origins of various groups of the Shudras by the notion of Sankirna Jati, which means that if there is an intercaste marriage, their progeny would be of a very low caste. This was the counterpart in ritual status to the economic and social deprivation of the peasants, slaves, and craftsmen. They had the most to lose from the erosion of kinship ties characterizing the Vedic society. Dasa Suddha is frequently mentioned in the contemporary literature. They were slaves who did not have any legal status. War prisoners and people who could not pay back their debts seemed to be the chief sources of supply of the Sudra labor. They were forced to work on the land of the rich. The Dasas, Karmkaras, and Kasakas were the sources of labor supply in rural areas. With the emergence of cities, the inequality between the rich and the poor further increased. All the groups mentioned above by no means exhaust the list of social categories present in the time of Buddha. Wandering dancers and musicians moved from village to village and impressed their audiences with their skills. Tricksters, tramps, elephant tamers, stage managers, soldiers, writers, archers, hunters, and barbers were some of the group which come in our view. It is difficult to place them in the caste order. Probably they would be considered outcasts. Most of them were outside the pale of the newly emerged agrarian society. As such, they were generally despised. Sometimes these groups rose in revolt. The Jataka stories are full of description of war. The poor Shudras are mentioned as living outside the city. The logical outcome of this process was the emergence of untouchability. The Chandalas are described as living in separate villages. Their presence was believed to be so polluting that the daughter of a Sethi washes her eyes on seeing a Chandala. Similarly, a Brahman is disturbed about the fact that a breeze blowing past a Chandala would touch him. The Chandalas are supposed to wear the garments of the dead and eat their food out of broken pots. Other such despised groups were the Pukusas, Nishads, and Venas. One of the justifications of the king's rule was that they protected the villages from the pillaging tribes. These were the primitive communities who were gradually evicted from their homes in the forests. They either became slaves or robbers. There are references to these groups. Wandering ascetics. One very visible group in this period was the Paribrajakas and Shramanas. These were people who had renounced their homes. They traveled from place to place and held discussions on the meaning of life, society, and spirituality. Among them were people like the Buddha and Mahavir. Condition of women. The changes in the economy and society of the 6th century BC also affected the condition of women. Since property was inherited from father to son, there was obsession with the need to prevent adultery. The books repeatedly say that the two most important functions of the king are punishing the violation of property and of the family. The meek slave-like wife was considered the ideal wife. However, this was true of the wives of the rich. For them, the main function of a wife was producing legitimate heirs. However, there were a larger number of women who spent their lives laboring for their masters and mistresses. Women were looked down in comparison to men. They were described as inseparable of sitting in a public assembly. They were permanently in charge of man father. They were permanently in charge of men, father, brother, or son. Even if they joined the Sangha, they were treated as inferior to men. Economy. We have seen that the process of state formation and social stratification gathered momentum and assumed significance in the middle of the first millennium BC. The two phenomena, which were closely interlinked, appeared because the new agriculture could not only sustain agriculturists but also many others who were not engaged directly in this vital task of primary production. Literary and archaeological sources, which reflect the economic pattern of the country during 6th to 5th century BC, contain evidence of the enhanced production of the agricultural wealth. The growth of the monastic orders living exclusively on alms and donations presupposes enough agricultural produce. The establishment of 16 Mahajanpads, along with their capital cities and standing armies, would not have been possible if agricultural produce could not sustain non-agriculturists. The location of the capital towns of this period, having a variety of crafts and trades in the river valleys with broad flood plains and on main trade route, also presuppose some surplus food production. Let us discuss some of the important aspects of economic life during this period. Factors in the growth of food producing economy. Some of the main causative factors which seem to have influenced agricultural growth were as follows. The crucial role of iron implements in cleaning the thick vegetation cover of the Ganga plains from about 600 BC onwards. Cereals like rice, barley, wheat, and millets were produced over the wider areas of land. Buddhists insisted on the protection of the cattle, and Sutta Nipata clearly states that they should not be slaughtered because they constituted a source of grain and strength. Thus, the preservation of cattle wealth for agricultural purposes was encouraged. What further distinguishes the force of production is the age of Buddha from those in the later Vedic times in the beginning of the paddy transplantation. The rice producing economy was supplemented by domestication and hunting of animals. This was another major means of their economic life and the source of livelihood. Archaeologists have recovered a large number of bones of cattle, sheep, goat, horses, and pigs from the number of archaeological sites. Thus, the animals were not only used for draught and the plug of feeds, but a section of the society were also probably non-vegetarian. Rural economy. As a rich agricultural hinterland was cultivated, trade too received an impetus. The transition was being made from a subsistence economy to a market economy. The introduction of coinage facilitated this development. It led to greater mobility, accelerated trade and commerce, and facilitated intercourse over a vast area, which resulted in the growth of a complex rural and urban economic system. That the village centers had their own economic pattern is revealed from a number of literary sources belonging to our period of study. It was based on a system of village communities of peasants proprietorship. The Pali texts speak of 3 types of villages. The typical village inhabited by various castes and communities. Suburban villages were in the nature of craft villages. These served as the markets for other villages and linked the town with countryside. Border villages consisting of hunters, fowlers, etc., who were leading a simple life. The rural economy developed through the establishment of new settlements by shifting surplus population from the overpopulated areas and also by rehabilitating the decaying villages. In such cases, cattle, seed, money, and irrigation facilities were given by rulers. Remission of taxes and other concessions were followed. Retired officials and priests were granted lands in such areas. Land in these areas could not be sold, mortgaged, or inherited. Grassland was owned in common. They had an independent internal economy. The chief occupation in the rural area remained to be agriculture. The village supplied surplus produce to the towns, and the towns supplied other necessities to the villagers. Whereas agriculture was the main occupation, cattle rearing and certain small crafts connected with land, forest, and animals catering to local requirements were the other features of the rural economy. Urban economy. The urban economy was dominated by traders and craftsmen who produced goods for a wider market on a larger scale. The necessary concomitants for the growth of urban economy were surplus food production, craft specialization, trade centers of exchange, use of metallic money, political organization ensuring order, and a literate society. The urban economy revolved around 2 important features. Firstly, industry with a larger number of professionals and craftsmen. Secondly, trade, both internal and external. We will discuss each factor one by one. Urban occupations. The urban occupations can be broadly categorized into 2 groups, that is, those connected with productive activities and those which had nothing to do with production as such. The second group, which was mainly composed of administrative officials, had hardly any direct impact on the urban economy. The merchants, however, who belonged to this category were an intermediary group, playing a vital role in the system of distribution. The material remains discovered from the various archaeological sites of northern India, such as pottery, particularly northern black polished, terracotta animal and human figurines, terracotta objects of games and amusement, objects of bone and ivory, coins, stone and glass objects, beds, copper and iron objects, etc., attest to the existence of various important crafts industries which can be classified under the following heads. These are clay working like pottery, terracotta figurines, modeling, and to some extent also brick making, etc., carpentry and wood working, metal working, stone working, glass industry, bone and ivory working, other miscellaneous industries like garland makers of bows and arrows, combs, baskets, perfume, liquor, oil, and musical instruments. Trade and trade routes. Linked with the growth of specialization of crafts is the development of trade. In those days, trade, both inland and foreign, was fairly brisk. Merchants made fortunes by dealing in articles like silks, muslin, armor, perfumes, ivory works, and jewelry, etc. They traveled along distances up and down the great rivers of the country and even undertook coastal voyages to Burma and Sri Lanka from Tamluk in the east and from Bhuj in the west. Inland, the traders followed certain well established routes. One of them ran from Sravasti to Pratisthan, another linked Sravasti with Rajgriha, a third skirted along the base of the Himalayas from Takshila to Sravasti, and a fourth connected Kashi with the ports of western coast. Long distance trade was, however, centered in the towns rather than at rural sites because the former were centers of production and consequently of distribution besides being better protected. The age of barter was almost drawing to a close. Now the ordinary medium of exchange was a coin called kahapana, karsappana. It was of copper and silver, and marks were punched on it by merchants or rulers' guilds, granting its standards. Banks were unknown, and surplus money was either converted into ornaments or hoarded in jars and buried in the ground or put in the custody of a friend. Now let us sum up in our study. A good portion of what is said about the socio-economic conditions of India is based on the early Pali texts and archaeology of the northern black polished ware face. The process of state formation and social stratification gathered momentum and assumed significance in the middle of the first millennium BC. A renewed emphasis was given to the four different roles that the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras were called upon to. The nature of the later Vedic society, PGW culture, in which only the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas played the important role, got disturbed due to the rise of a trading class, the Vaishyas, whose strength emerged from the money earned. All kinds of restrictions were imposed on the Shudras. The food producing economy was immensely strengthened by the use of iron implements, transplantation of paddy, and by religious sanction of the preservation of cattle. The transition was from the subsistence economy to market economy. Trade and the system of coinage also played its role in the development of urban economy, whereas agriculture, cattle rearing, and certain small crafts connected with lands, forests, and animals were the chief features of rural economy. Urban economy was dominated by a large number of professionals and craftsmen who produced for wider circulation and more consumption. This led to greater mobility, increased trade and trade routes, and resulted in the growth of a complicated rural and urban economic system. कीवर्ड्स हैं पेंटेड ग्रे वेयर, नॉर्दर्न ब्लैक पॉलिश्ड वेयर, सबसिस्टेंस मतलब क्या होता है, मीन्स ऑफ सपोर्टिंग लाइफ, किनशिप होता है रिलेशनशिप बाय बर्थ और मैरिज, मॉर्टगेज पता है गिव अ मनी लेंडर अ क्लेम ऑन प्रॉपर्टी एज अ सिक्योरिटी फॉर मनी बोरोड, प्रोजेनी क्या होता है सन या डॉटर, नेक्स्ट जनरेशन को प्रोजेनी बोलते हैं.